priest to me. In other words, coming from all of these Baal worshipers. Who is Baal? Baal is religion. Baal is selfishness. Baal is childishness. Baal is when you are so deep into idolatry and sorcery, even the truth will be despised when you hear it, or better said, when they hear it. He said it'll be like vomit, the truth would be. They would throw it up to eat the vomit of what they were trained into. He goes on to say, so since you have done this, you have forgotten, or seeing that you have forgotten the Torah of Yahuwah. You notice it says Torah here. Not your New Testament, not your religion, not what you were trained and what you were brought up into by your mother. That's why he said he's going to destroy her too, if she's a part of it. That she's the first teacher of the child. So all you mothers and grandmothers out there that are teaching your children your church religion, whatever it is you're teaching them other than this Torah, you will say, I got something specially planned for your ass. And you're not going to like it. He goes on, since you have forgotten the Torah of Yahuwah, I will also forget your children. And that's why your children are running around here like heathens. Your children are acting like, the other nation, the dominant nation here. Or wherever they may dwell on this earth. No chastity. Can't be corrected. No ethics, no morals. No value of Yahuwah. No respect for their own souls or the souls of others. That's why he said blood touches blood. If you've been following this work, and by the way, Shalom, YASHAREL, the DFG. But if you've been, and I'm going to continue on, we're going to go through this whole chapter. But if you've been following this work, you know that most recently, I have shared with my brothers and sisters, when I say most recently, probably for the better part of the beginning of January, that there was something going on suspicious about the book of Genesis. Because I couldn't understand how could all of these prophets, mighty men of Yahuwah, every last one of them that said something about the beginning, they never mentioned the book of Genesis. And it bothered me because I said, I know we can't be in that New Testament. I know it's a book of sorcery. I know the heathens wrote it. It goes all the way back to Babylon. I said, but something is missing. I can feel it in my ruach. I said, something's just not right. And I could hear the voice of Yahuwah just whispering. Because I hadn't even noticed it. I just heard saying, Genesis isn't right. Genesis is a book that turned my people away from me. Genesis is the book that 1 Maccabees 3:48 references when they said that the heathens sought to write their likeness in their image in the Torah. I'm like, well, what book in the Torah would that have been? I mean, I looked at, Exodus, and I'm just telling you about my fight, my plight. And I'm thinking, I said, well, it's not in Exodus because Exodus is full of the law. It's not in Numbers because Numbers is, it's the gathering of the tribes. It says not in Leviticus because it's the standard of Yahuwah. It's not in Deuteronomy because Deuteronomy pushes us through the wickedness. This is why when you read Deuteronomy chapter 4, he says, don't add, take away from my word. Chapter 6, he said, teach your children the Torah. Put it everywhere. Chapter 7 says that we're a special people, a chosen people. Chapter 13 said, put evil from the midst of us. Chapter 17 talks about there must be witnesses as well for this truth. And that we should listen to those who had chosen to put in place of leadership. Chapter 28 tells us if we keep the Torah, we obey the Torah, we obey these laws, these standards of Yahuwah. Chapter 30 tells us he gives us a decision, a choice to make. Chapter 32 tells us that that vengeance belongs to him. So I could not see any schism, any error in any of that. So it left me back to Genesis. And it began, as I saw where all the prophets never mentioned Genesis, but they talked about Jasher. Yahuwah mentioned Jasher to Joshua. Joshua talked about Jasher. King David talked about Jasher to King Saul. So that means they both would have been aware. Samuel talked about Jasher. That means he would have been aware. So as I began to look at all of this, I said it could only be somewhere in Genesis. And lo and behold, Yahuwah revealed it to me. He said Jesus came to be from Genesis. And he said you cannot embrace Genesis without embracing the heathen God, Jesus or Yahweh or whatever number of names that he's been given. And here we are today. And you would think that because of this truth, and this is why he said my people are destroyed for a lack of the knowledge. Vacuumous. Vacuumous means, I'll tell you, means empty-headed. Void-headed. Stubborn, rebellious. It doesn't even matter what the truth is anymore to them. He said, when he reminded us, he said, when you go into the land for which you shall live, learn none of the ways of those people. That's Deuteronomy chapter 18. He said they were sorcerers, they were divinators, they were what, brothers and sisters? Enchanters, that they would pray to spirits. They would believe that something came back from the dead. Even though the wisdom book says there's no such thing. The dead knows nothing. He goes on, he tells us what? That Ecclesiastes, 9:4 says that a living dog, as filthy and unclean as a dog is better than a dead lion. Why? Because the dead know nothing. They have no more reward. And if that's not enough, the Torah tells us that the Son doesn't die for the sins of the Father, nor the Father dies for the sins of the Son. But yet this whole story about their so-called Messiah goes totally against that. In other words, they're saying that Yahuwah is a liar. And that lie starts in the book of Genesis, in their occultic book. Even the word Genesis, brothers and sisters, is tied into sorcery. You got to go beyond Googling up. First thing they're going to show you, the heathens are in all of the information processes and programs. They write all of this information to create confusion amongst the brothers and sisters, particularly YASHAREL. They desecrate Yahuwah and elevate whomever their God is, whether it be Yahweh or Jesus or Buddha or Kala or themselves. It doesn't really matter. Satan. So they gave us an occultic book to start, a beginning book. This is why he said the Torah is where they hid it or could put it. They didn't hide it. It was there for all. And they had the church, your pastor, your mother, your first teacher. Repeated, parroted over and over and over. And stuffed it so far down inside of your throat, our throats, that the vomit is now being eaten over and over. The so-called undigested food.